$50 billion. That was the offer. A colossal offer wrapped in promises of progress made by none other than Bill Gates himself. A futuristic vaccine hub branded VaxFaso to rise in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. On paper it was salvation, jobs, infrastructure, self-sufficiency, independence from foreign medicine. The world called it a miracle waiting to happen, Africa's leap into a healthier, stronger future. But when President Ibrahim Traoré sat across from the richest philanthropist on earth, he didn't smile. He didn't nod politely. He simply said no. One word that sent shockwaves from Geneva to Washington, from corporate boardrooms to newsrooms. Because this wasn't just about vaccines. It was about power, memory, and refusing to be fooled again. Why would an African leader reject a $50 billion project that the world celebrated? What invisible strings did Traoré see behind the smiling face of philanthropy? In July 2025, global headlines lit up with praise for Bill Gates and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The $50 billion investment was hailed as a turning point, a state-of-the-art vaccine factory in Burkina Faso to manufacture cures for malaria, tuberculosis, and whatever pandemic came next. Western leaders applauded it as generosity. The WHO called it historic. Newspapers from New York to London called it Africa's big leap forward. But inside Burkina Faso, the reaction was different. Suspicion simmered, and at the center of it was Traoré, young, revolutionary, distrustful of soft power. He didn't see hope. He saw a trap. In a fiery televised address, Traoré stripped away the glossy PR. He called VaxFaso a humanitarian disguise for exploitation. The deal, he revealed, required foreign control over key raw materials, moringa rare medicinal plants. Worse, it granted outsiders access to sensitive health data, biological samples, even intellectual property from future cures. This is not partnership, he thundered. This is colonization in a lab coat. And he wasn't finished. He reminded his people, and the world, that this wasn't the first time charity had come with poison hidden in the cup. Kenya, 2014. A government vaccination campaign backed by international health agencies was later found to contain hormones linked to infertility. They didn't come to save our women, Traoré declared. They came to shut their wombs. COVID-19, 2021. While Europe and the US hoarded vaccines, Africa was used as a testing ground. Parents were not told the risks, and rushed clinical trials turned African children into live subjects for pharmaceutical giants. They needed our children, Traoré said bitterly, not for protection but for data, for profit. He accused Western medicine of creating a loop of dependency, release treatments before understanding long-term effects, then sell more drugs to treat the side effects. They claim to fight disease, he warned, but their medicine creates markets for more medicine. Then Traoré turned his fire directly on Bill Gates, not the smiling philanthropist, but the monopolist who once dominated software through Microsoft and was dragged to court for antitrust violations. Monopoly was never an accident, Traoré said. It was his business model. First he monopolized our computers. Now he wants to monopolize our biology. He accused Gates of harvesting African DNA through projects like H3 Africa, building genetic pipelines for Western pharmaceutical firms. He pointed to Gates' influence over African schools and media, claiming it wasn't education, it was reprogramming. They don't want our children educated, he thundered. They want them rewired to obey, to consume, to forget who they are. And then came his boldest claim yet. Bill Gates wasn't acting alone. He was merely the frontman for a G7 agenda, a new colonial strategy, not through armies, but through algorithms and charity. To many in the West, rejecting $50 billion looked like madness. But to Traoré, accepting it would have meant surrender, not of money, but of sovereignty. His government released details of the VaxFaso contracts, exposing clauses that handed 70% of the factory's machinery, servers, and research protocols to US and European suppliers, all locked behind patents. It wouldn't be our factory, Traoré said. It would be their fortress, built on our soil with our labor, feeding their profits. The documents also revealed something more chilling. The deal gave foreign partners access to Burkina Faso's national health database, anonymized but fully exportable. To Traoré, this wasn't science. It was surveillance. The people responded. From Ouagadougou to Bobo Dioulasso, protests erupted. Citizens chanted, "Our blood is not for sale." Civil society leaders warned that health policy was being outsourced to Seattle and Brussels. What the West called philanthropy, the people began to call a Trojan horse. But Traoré wasn't content with rejection. He launched a counter-revolution. Instead of waiting for Western aid, he announced the creation of a National Institute for Indigenous Medicine, a place where Africa's ancestral knowledge would meet modern science on African terms. "We do not reject medicine," he said. "We reject monopoly. We reject the idea that science must belong to someone else to be valid." Neem leaves, artemisia, moringa, baobab, plants long dismissed as folklore were catalogued and studied by African scientists. Community health centers offered patients a choice: Western treatment or certified traditional therapies. Outrage came swiftly from international NGOs who accused Traoré of being anti-science. His reply, "This is science, it just doesn't belong to you." At first, Western media mocked him. The Financial Times called him reckless. Le Monde said he was playing politics with lives. The New York Times wondered if he was too radical. But outside the echo chamber, his defiance struck a deep chord. In the U.S., activists remembered Tuskegee. Black scholars and health advocates said Traoré wasn't paranoid. He was naming truths others refused to say. On Reddit, Substack, and independent media, writers compared him to Malcolm X, Sankara, even JFK. "He said no," one columnist wrote, "to the man no one dares to say no to." Then came the bombshell. In August 2025, Burkina Faso's Minister of Science unveiled a leaked dossier, the Vax-Faso Protocols. The documents proved the project wasn't just about vaccines. It included a parallel initiative called BioTrace, a program to install wearable trackers in rural clinics, monitoring not just health but movement and behavior. Another revealed partnerships with biotech firms previously accused of exporting African DNA without consent. "This was not a factory," Traoré said gravely. "It was a Trojan server injected into our health system, into our privacy, into our future." And the most shocking part, the documents were dated years before the offer was even announced. The deal had been plotted in secret, long before Africa was even told. That revelation set West Africa ablaze. Students filled the streets chanting, "Our blood is not business." Civil servants resigned in protest. What was once sold as charity now looked like digital colonialism. But Traoré didn't stop there. He called an emergency summit in Bamako with leaders from Mali, Guinea, Niger, and envoys from Cuba, Venezuela, and Iran. Together they signed the Pan-African Pact for Medical Sovereignty, a continental agreement to reject foreign-led health projects without full transparency, to protect indigenous medicine under African copyright, and to launch a homegrown vaccine consortium led by African scientists. "The virus we must defeat is not only biological," Traoré declared. "It is geopolitical. It is the belief that we are forever patients, never the healers. Today we become both." Burkina Faso, once dismissed as one of the poorest nations on earth, had rebranded itself as a moral giant. It didn't gain a factory. It gained a voice. And that voice was now echoing from Africa to Asia, from Latin America to the streets of Paris. President Ibrahim Traoré could have taken $50 billion, posed for cameras beside gates, and been praised as a visionary. Instead, he stood alone. He chose history over headlines, sovereignty over applause, dignity over dependency. And in doing so, he sparked a movement. What began as a refusal had become a revival. "Fire, we did not ask permission to be free," Traoré said. "We stood up and took it." If his courage touches your heart, share this story. Subscribe to carry forward the journey of an Africa that no longer bows. God bless Africa. God bless those who still choose courage.